Welcome to another deep dive. We're tackling some stories today from the book of Genesis.
Chapters 31 through 35.
Right, 31 through 35. We've got some excerpts from a podcast episode that really breaks these down, and it's fascinating because it's one continuous story about Jacob and his family.
Yeah, you could think of it almost like a mini-series
Yeah,
in Genesis.
it is, and it's a wild one too. We're going to be exploring themes of transformation, reconciliation, a whole lot of family drama,
Oh, yeah.
and the continuation of God's covenant. Get ready for a wrestling match with God, a daring escape.
And some forgiveness that you might not expect.
Yeah, definitely not what I would have expected.
These chapters are really key for understanding how Jacob, who starts out as kind of a shady character.
A bit of a trickster.
Yeah, trickster becomes the patriarch, Israel.
Right, and of course.
His descendants become the Israelites.
Yeah.
So this is really foundational for understanding the history of the Jewish people.
Absolutely. Let's start with Genesis 31. Jacob fleeing from his uncle Laban. This always kind of struck me as interesting. I mean, their relationship starts out okay, but ends with Jacob like hightailing it out of there.
It's a reminder of how family relationships can get really strained,
Oh, yeah.
especially when there's a sense of injustice. Laban keeps changing Jacob's wages,
Right.
which creates a lot of tension.
Yeah. And you get the sense that Jacob kind of hits that breaking point.
Definitely.
He decides to take his wives, kids, everything he owns, and head back to his homeland. I can't even imagine having to make that kind of decision to just leave everything behind.
It's a bold move for sure.
Yep.
And of course, Laban is not happy.
No.
He takes off after Jacob, but God steps in
Oh, yeah.
with a dream,
In a dream.
warning Laban to leave Jacob alone.
Wow. I bet that was a pretty intense dream for Laban.
I would think so.
It makes me think that God is very active
Oh, yeah.
in these events
Definitely.
and all this family drama.
Working behind the scenes.
Yeah, for sure. So they eventually, Laban and Jacob,
Right.
make a covenant of peace.
Right.
Part ways.
We agree to disagree,
Yeah.
but at least it ends peacefully.
It
Yeah.
You know, it makes me think about times in my own life where I've had to move on from situations or relationships that were just not healthy anymore.
Sure.
And sometimes walking away is the best option, even if it's really hard.
Absolutely.
Genesis 32 then takes us to, even more tension, really.
The plot thickens.
Yeah, Jacob's on his way back to his brother Esau, and he tricked Esau years ago.
Right.
So I imagine he's probably dreading this reunion.
Yeah, I'd be nervous.
Yeah, if someone tricked me like that, I'd be a little upset.
For sure.
This is where Jacob has his famous wrestling match.
All night long.
Yeah, all night long with this mysterious being.
It's often interpreted as an angel or even God himself.
Right. Such a powerful scene.
Full of emotion.
Yeah. What do you think Jacob's really wrestling with here? It's not just a physical fight, is it?
No, I think it represents a spiritual struggle. Okay.
The kind we all face when we confront our fears, our doubts.
Our insecurities.
Yeah. Those big questions about life.
Those big existential questions.
And our relationship with God.
I mean, this wrestling match leads to Jacob's name being changed to Israel.
Which means he who struggles with God.
So it's more than just a name change.
Right.
It's about transformation.
Yeah, becoming something new through struggle.
And the fact that he receives a blessing after this struggle suggests that even when we're going through those really hard times, even when we feel like we're wrestling with God,
Yeah.
there's still a possibility for grace and transformation.
Absolutely.
Which makes what happens in Genesis 33 so fascinating. So Jacob, he's ready for the worst.
Yeah.
Approaches Esau offering gifts, bowing low, probably expecting a fight.
And then Esau embraces Jacob, forgives him completely.
What a turnaround.
Right.
After all those years of animosity, they reconcile. I'll admit, the first time I read this, I was completely shocked.
It's powerful.
It really is. Because it highlights the power of forgiveness and reconciliation.
Yeah, even after years of brokenness.
There's a possibility of
It
healing.
really makes you think about those grudges we hold on to. Maybe the people we need to forgive or even ask forgiveness from.
Definitely.
Forgiveness is really powerful.
It is.
But then in Genesis 34, things get really, really dark. Dinah, Jacob's daughter,
Yeah.
is raped by Shechem. And this sets off a chain of events that are really hard to process.
This is one of the most difficult stories in Genesis.
So it is.
Dinah's brothers, Simeon and Levi, they're enraged.
Oh, and understandably so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they trick the men of Shechem City into being circumcised.
Oh, wow.
And then they attack and kill them all.
You know, I get their anger,
Yeah.
but their actions just lead to more violence and chaos.
It's a tough passage.
It really is.
It forces us to look at justice and revenge.
Yeah. Where do we even begin to unpack something like this?
It raises so many questions
Yeah.
about how we respond to injustice.
Is revenge ever the answer?
Yeah, is it ever justified? How do we stop these cycles of violence? These are questions that people are asking today.
Yeah, they're still relevant.
Still relevant.
It's a real challenge to think about how we can respond to injustice in a way that leads to healing instead of just more harm.
Definitely. And it's something we'll continue to explore as we go deeper into these chapters.
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
Let's do it.
Man, that story with Dinah in Genesis 34,
It's heavy.
it's a lot. Yeah.
It is.
It really makes you think about the fact that even in these big stories,
Yeah.
These narratives of covenant and blessing,
Right.
these terrible things happen.
It really does make you think about the darker side of human nature,
Yeah.
even in a family that's supposed to be chosen by God.
Yeah, their story is definitely not all neat and tidy.
Definitely not a Hallmark movie.
No, not at all. It really makes you think about the choices we make,
Right.
especially when we're driven by anger or grief.
Yeah. It's easy to say we'd act differently,
Okay.
but who knows what we would actually do.
You never know until you're in that situation.
Exactly.
But Genesis 35 takes us in a little bit of a more hopeful direction. God tells Jacob to go back to Bethel.
That place where he first encountered God.
Yeah, it's like he's being called back to his spiritual roots.
Yeah, after all this drama.
After all that drama and tragedy.
Kind of a sense of coming full circle.
Yeah, I'd say so. And at Bethel, God reaffirms that covenant he made with Abraham and Isaac. Like, even when we mess up,
Yeah, when we make bad choices.
God's love and faithfulness are still there.
Always constant.
Yeah. This is also where we see Jacob building an altar to God.
A physical reminder.
Yeah, like a physical representation of his commitment.
Renewing his commitment.
It makes me think about those times in my life when I've needed to recommit to my faith,
Sure.
to kind of remember what's really
Those
important.
moments are so important.
Yeah.
To rededicate yourself.
They are. But Genesis 35, it's not all sunshine and roses.
Yeah.
It's where we see the death of Rachel
Jacob's beloved wife.
while giving birth to Benjamin.
Yeah,
Man, that is such a heartbreaking moment.
it is.
The contrast between the joy of this new life and then the deep sorrow of loss.
All mixed together.
Yeah.
It really does reflect the complexity of life.
It does.
I mean, even in the middle of blessing, covenant renewal,
Yeah.
there's still pain and grief.
And later in the chapter,
Right.
Jacob's father Isaac dies.
Yeah, like one era is ending.
Yeah, it really feels like a transition.
Passing the torch.
Yeah. I wonder how Jacob felt,
Oh, yeah.
carrying the weight of his family's legacy.
And dealing with all that grief.
Yeah, the grief of losing his wife and his father.
Losing both parents.
Wow. Yeah,
It's a reminder that life has its ups and downs.
definitely.
We go through those highs,
Oh,
those
yes.
terrible lows,
And the lows.
but through it all,
God is with us.
always.
Always.
Yeah.
You know, when I look back at these chapters, it's amazing how much happens.
In such a short time,
I mean, Jacob escapes from Laban,
right? Wrestles with God,
reconciles with Esau,
faces injustice,
tragedy.
and ultimately renews that covenant with God.
It's like a crash course
No,
in the human experience.
it really is.
I mean, it's fascinating to think that these stories,
yeah.
they were written thousands of years ago, but they still resonate with us today.
They tap into these themes
Oh, yeah.
of family, faith, betrayal,
Forgiveness
the search for meaning,
in the midst of suffering.
things that are relevant
They are timeless.
no matter when you live.
We all have our own wrestling matches,
Oh, yeah.
those struggles that shape us.
They define us.
Sometimes they lead to breakthroughs,
Sometimes heartbreak.
but it's that journey that makes us who we are.
And we don't go through it alone. Even when we don't see it, God's there,
Working behind the scenes.
guiding us.
Yeah, I find it fascinating that even though these characters are so flawed,
Right.
God still chose them to be a part of his plan.
That makes you think
It does.
that God can use anyone.
Yeah, even those of us who make mistakes
Right.
to do amazing things.
That's encouraging.
It is encouraging. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Part 2.
what has resonated with you the most?
What part of Jacob's story has stood out to you?
What part of Jacob's story has stood out to you and why? And how might those themes be playing out in your own life right now?
We'll be back soon with Part 3, where we'll continue to explore these stories and their relevance for us today.
So stick around, we've got a lot more to uncover. And we are back for the final part of our deep dive into Genesis 31 through 35. It's amazing how many twists and turns
Oh, yeah.
there are in Jacob's journey.
It's like a soap opera with a deeper meaning.
It really is.
There's deception and romance,
Family feuds,
divine encounters,
it's all there.
but it's all woven together with these lessons about faith,
Forgiveness.
God's faithfulness.
And speaking of God's faithfulness,
Yeah.
it's a theme that comes up again and again in these chapters.
Yeah.
Even when Jacob makes bad choices,
Even when things get messy,
God never gives up on him.
never gives up.
That's a good reminder for all of us.
It is.
No matter what we've done,
No matter how far we've strayed,
God's love and mercy are always there.
always available.
It reminds me of that story of the prodigal son,
Oh, yeah.
where the father welcomes him back.
Open arms,
No questions asked.
unconditional love.
Yeah, that same kind of love that God has for Jacob.
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture of grace.
It is.
And you see it all through the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
God is always pursuing us.
Drawing us back.
Always.
Yeah. So looking back on all these chapters,
Mm-hmm.
what stands out to you as the biggest takeaway for us today?
I think one of the biggest things is that transformation is a process.
Okay.
It's not always easy,
It's not.
and it often involves struggle.
Yeah, look at Jacob. I mean, he
Listen.
wrestles with God, family drama, joy,
The
sorrow.
whole spectrum.
He goes through it all.
But through it all, he's becoming who God wants him to be.
That's a good point.
Mm.
And it doesn't happen overnight, right?
No, it takes time,
It takes time.
patience,
Mm-hmm.
a willingness to surrender to God's will,
Even when it's hard.
even when we don't understand it.
Especially when we don't understand it.
Yeah,
And we're not alone in that process.
we're not.
God is with us.
Every step of the way,
Yeah.
guiding us,
Strengthening us.
empowering us.
Yeah. To become more like him.
Exactly.
These stories also really highlight that forgiveness is so important.
It is.
Giving it and receiving it.
Both.
Like when Jacob and Esau reconcile.
Yeah. What a powerful example of healing
It is. Even those deep wounds can be healed.
when there's forgiveness,
Yeah. That's a powerful message for us today.
especially in a world that feels so divided,
So divided.
unforgiving.
Yeah.
It's a challenge to let go of that bitterness
To offer grace
to those who've hurt us.
the way God offers grace to us.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Genesis 31 through 35,
Wow, what a journey.
it has been a journey.
It has.
I hope you've gotten some new insights into these stories.
Yeah, and how they still speak to us today.
We've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore.
Different interpretations to consider.
Yeah, that's the great thing about these old texts.
Mm.
They challenge us,
Inspire us.
offer us guidance.
Yeah. I mean, the key takeaway for me
Mm-hmm.
is that even though these stories are from thousands of years ago,
Right.
they're still relevant.
They're timeless.
They offer wisdom about faith,
Family,
forgiveness.
the human condition,
Yeah. And they remind us that God is always at work,
always.
even in our mess,
Yeah.
in our struggles.
He never stops working.
So as you go about your week,
Yeah.
think about these stories.
Mm-hmm.
What are you wrestling with?
Where do you need to offer forgiveness?
Or maybe seek forgiveness?
How is God calling you to grow and transform?
Those are good questions.
Big questions.
They are. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great.
We hope you enjoyed it
Me too.
and that you'll join us again next time
Next time.
for another deep dive into the scriptures.
Always more to learn.
There is. Thanks, everyone.